place to start.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is recording.
How is this? My clothes aren't fully buttoned. I didn't realize.
Doing great.
I sat down, I was like, that's scan.
Welcome to the people who are coming in the room right now. We will we'll let the room populate a little bit more before we get started. And the chat should be working, so please, if you're able to, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. I'm also dropping my email address in there so that anyone can contact me if they need to, send an email or a voice note or anything you want to. Is the closed captioning should be working as well as the live transcript? If for some reason they're not, let us know in the chat and we will try to address it. And if not, we'll make sure you have the video after. Yeah, okay, should be working. Okay, great. So I want to respect the time of the folks who are here. Thank you so much, and get started. And we can catch people up as they come in. Does that sound good to both of you? Fantastic. Okay, so welcome everyone to the third installment of URL Media's 4-part series on the first 90 days in a new job. This is all about understanding disability in the workplace, whether you're a manager, an employee, someone who's been dealing with disability for a long time, or is new to it. We welcome you, and I'm very excited. My name is Sonali Kohli. I am a senior recruiter for URL Media. We talked before this about doing visual descriptions, so I'm going to try to do mine. I am a brown Indian American woman with like curly-ish hair today, in a black sweatshirt with flowers, with art behind me and a pastel-y mural on the wall. And I am going to introduce our two panelists who will then add what they have to say. So Kara Reedy is the Media Narrative Director at the Disabled Journalists Association, which is a member org of Storyline Partners. She's a journalist and a producer who spent 10 years of her career at CNN producing documentaries as well as writing for various verticals, including Etocracy, which is the best name I've ever heard, and CNN Business. In 2019, she produced her most recent short documentary for The Guardian entitled Dwarfism and Me, which was an exploration of the treatment of dwarfs in American society. Thank you for being here, Kara. Jeff Lafata Hernandez founded Empowering People for Inclusive Communities, or EPIC, in 2011 to address the unmet needs of transition-aged youth with disabilities. In addition to building EPIC's youth leadership programs, Jeff utilizes over 2 decades of experience in disability services, along with his lived experience as a person with a disability, to provide disability justice, inclusion, and anti-ableism expertise through EPIC training and consulting. Thank you for being here, Jeff. So for everyone who's here, this is an on-the-record chat. We're recording this. You should be able to see closed captions and the live transcript. And we will be uploading this to YouTube in the coming weeks. So you should be able to see it, hear it, read it, and you should be able to download the live transcript at the end of this as well. If there's any other way that we can accommodate your needs, let us know and we'll try to make it happen. So Jeff and Kara, could you please start by telling me, how do you define, first of all, anything I missed in the introduction? Tell me how you would define disability, how it has shown up in your work or life, in whatever way you feel comfortable sharing, and what is the language by which you prefer to talk about disability in terms of person-centered or identity-centered? Kara, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'll just do a quick visual description. I'm a dwarf. a black dwarf with curly dark hair. I'm wearing gold glasses and I'm sitting in front of some artwork and a couch. I'm wearing a black shirt dress and red lipstick. I am of the identity first, which means like I just did in my visual description, I'm a dwarf. When you see me, you'd see it. So why not call me what I am? And there's nothing wrong or shameful in it. And that's like, it's part of my identity. It would be like saying, I think this is also, I'm going to go on a tangent, but like when people use words other than disability or disabled, like differently abled, you're being weird. And it's like you've said that whatever this is that I am is wrong. So I'm going to call you something else because I'm uncomfortable with calling you something that's wrong. Whereas you could just change your mind and be like, there's nothing wrong with being disabled. Because we all are going to be disabled if you like, even if you escape it in your youth, by the time you hit like 60, you're going to be disabled. You just are like, and so you should get ready for it and start calling yourself like, I think we're going to get shirts made that like future disabled because like rebrand it because there's nothing wrong with it. But that's how I like to talk about it.
I love it. Great. Thank you for that. And then how do you define disability?
Well, I go with kind of like the ADA version of it, which is very all-encompassing. If you have something that needs accommodations, then you have a disability. And we're very dead set on, there's these words sometimes that people use like level of ability instead of just saying disability. And so level of ability makes me think that like we're on these stair steps, which means that you're grading people's level, but what levels? Like two of us here are wearing glasses, those are accommodations. And so why are the glasses, the accommodations okay, and the others aren't? And so I think of disability as just this all encompassing. If you need an accommodation, you're probably disabled.
Oh yeah, the supply chain has really brought into focus. My eyesight is disability because I couldn't get contacts for a long time and I can't see without them. And we just don't, because it's so ubiquitous, we don't think about it as a disability, but the reality is, as you're saying, disability is ubiquitous. We should give everyone the accommodations they need. So thank you for that. Jeff, same question. How do you define disability? What language do you prefer? And anything else you wanna share about yourself?
Awesome. So my name is Jeff. My pronouns are he, him, his. Visual description. I am a skinny white male with light colored facial hair. I'm wearing a gray hat and glasses and a black vest with a gray sweater. And my background is blurry, so it's just a blur. So for me, defining disability, I would actually go the same way. I kind of go to the ADA definition. The one thing I always like to really make clear to people, though, is the difference between diagnosis and identity. And so a lot of people may fit under the definition by the ADA, but it does not mean they identify as disabled. And there's a lot of barriers to diagnosis. So you don't need a diagnosis to necessarily identify as disabled, which I think is really important for folks to remember. As far as language, I don't have a preference. As person first, identity first. I actually, because of my job and working with so many people who prefer both, I naturally just switch back and forth all the time. But much like Kara said, like not the other terms, not special needs, not differently abled, none of those. Disabled or disability, I'm fine with either one. And as far as disability experience, I have invisible disabilities, learning disabilities, mental health diagnoses. And so because I run a nonprofit that works with youth with disabilities, employs people with disabilities, and provides trainings around ableism and disabilities, it's my every second of every day. I feel like I'm just surrounded by disability.
Are we all, truly? Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And for anyone wondering about some of the jargon, I just don't want to assume anyone knows anything. ADA is referring to the Americans with Disability Act, which I think passed in 1990. And it's a federal law, and person first versus identity first centered language is pretty self-explanatory. It's the idea that you start with who you are as person first. So I'm Sonali and I have a disability versus I'm Sonali, like I'm disabled, I'm Sonali. And people have different preferences, as we've talked about, and we try to respect whatever they want us to say. So one of the things, Jeff, that you said actually leads really well into the first question I had, which is the definition, the difference between diagnosis and identity. How does that come up in the workplace, both from an employer and an employee level? If you like, how does that come up? And how do you navigate it, especially if you're starting a new job or if you're the manager of someone new?
I think what I see that comes up the most as far as the employee goes is, unfortunately, if you don't identify, you're probably not going to ask for the accommodations that you need. So going through that process of identifying and it's not always pretty going through that process, like which is fine, and it's part of your individual process. But I think yeah, I think that's the biggest barrier, is that if you don't identify, you're not going to go to your supervisor or HR and request an accommodation. I see a lot of young people that I work with that have had a really hard time in college because they go to college, but they don't identify, so they don't go and get the accommodations they need. So from the employee standpoint, I feel like that comes into play. For the employer standpoint, you don't need to know their diagnoses. And that is what I would really stress, is that is not needed information for you. What is needed is the accommodations, the barriers, the limitations, like what accommodation do you need and how is it going to make you successful? So that's what I would say.
And we're talking about in terms of like, you don't need to know their diagnoses, like legally in the United States. You don't need to know. What you do need to know is what accommodation they need, what the barrier is, and what the limitations are, just to clarify.
Yeah, so someone doesn't need to be like, I have spina bifida and I need XYZ. They just need to say, these are the obstacles or barriers in my position, and these are the accommodations that would remedy those barriers.
That is, I think, really, really important to know. And Kara, building off on that, what do workplaces, in particular newsrooms and newsroom managers, need to understand about disability within their organizations and how to approach it and handle it?
I think that there is such in the culture in newsrooms is such a grind that I think people really believe that you need to be at work for 14 hours and you need to be in front of a computer and you need to be there, like in the space. And I personally know journalists that like people are recruiting and they really want, but maybe they can only work 4 hours a day. But here's the thing. If you walk around any newsroom, some people are only working 4 hours a day.
So true.
They're just in the newsroom 8. And I think in general, newsrooms, but all workplaces need to start really living in reality, in that you don't have to be at work. You don't have to be in the building. We can do everything unless you're doing something where you have to spin screws or do something like that. But newsrooms, you don't really have to be there unless you're in the field. And so we need to start really taking, if someone says, look, I have to work from home 4 days a week, and they're still putting out the same work, okay. And if they're not, then I guess have a discussion around it, but that could be an accommodation as well. I think there's this myth that everyone has to do the same amount of grind work. And I don't think that's true. I think there's benefit in having all different kinds of people in your newsroom. First of all, if you're in a newsroom and you're already segregating it, how are you going out and reporting on the stories where you're living in your 8 hours a day, you're living in an ableist environment? And I don't think journalism in general has really come to grips with that if you are living in this area, if you're working in an environment where people don't feel comfortable asking for accommodations, for saying they're disabled, then there's no way you are reporting on disability properly.
Yeah, that's
And
a really, oh, sorry, go ahead.
but that's just and I've been in newsrooms and I know it's true because I've been in them. And when I've pitched disability stories, I get thrown this like wave of ableism that they don't even know it's there, but it's because I'm the only visibly disabled person in the newsroom. I'm not the only disabled person. I'm the only visibly disabled person.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. One question, I have a bunch of follow-ups. One I want to focus on right now because this is a series about the first 90 days, right? So you're starting a new job. Two questions for both of you. One, if you're on the employer side, how do you support your employees without making problematic assumptions, right? Because it can switch from accommodating to, I think there's a worry of people feel like if they disclose, they won't get the kinds of assignments they want. So how do you support your employees, make it clear that you're an accommodating workplace from the beginning, from their first day? Like, what are best practices for navigating that? And then on the flip side, for a new employee, like, how do you communicate what you need at the start of a new job and what's the right time? Jeff, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So as an employer, I think there's a couple things. There's like the immediate. So I know one thing that I do a lot is I'm very upfront when new staff start. And I say from the get-go, I'm not going to assume anything, but I'm here to help in any way I can. So if you need something, let me know. And I say that verbally to them. But then I also have a fun little like one pager of like getting to know you that says, fill out whatever you want and leave blank whatever you want. And so it has like your pronouns. Do you need any accommodation? What's your favorite food? Any allergies? Like, when's your birthday? Just to get to know the person and automatically just build that into day one. But I think it's also to remember that there's a long-term piece to this of culture. And so if you as a supervisor could be great and you could say all of this and do all of this, but if they're coming into a company where from the second they get there, they're experiencing ableism and the terms people are using and the tone people are using, right? It's that barrier is going to be in place. So there is a larger conversation around what are you doing as a company when it comes to culture and disability and anti-ableism work to build that. I think as an employee, it's that one's harder for me to answer because of course I want to be like, go in and advocate for what you want and get what you need. And like, but I'm also like, I want you to feel safe. And so I want you to feel things out. If you walk in that first day and you feel like this isn't the right time yet, and you need to feel it out for a week or two, feel it out for a week or two. But in an ideal world, I would be like, go in there and just say, bam, this is what I need. So I think, sorry, one more thing. I really think this comes down to, for me, the onus is on the employer. Like you need to build a culture and the supervisor needs to be, or manager needs to be open and have dialogue and build relationship so that it is safe for the employee to disclose on that first day.
And before we jump to Kara, when we talk about the onus being on the employer, like what does an employer need to know legally about what they're required to, like, what is the sentence you can say to, as like someone who talks to employers regularly, as someone who trains them, or as an employee, to make it clear, like, this is on you to be accommodating? Because you're correct, the onus is on the employer. Unfortunately, it's also true what you're saying, that like many employers do not accept that responsibility or do not think about it. So what do employers need to know about what their obligation is to their employees?
So, I mean, we're talking, there's the legal part that you just asked, which if an employer asks me that, I come back to them right away with your only concern should not be the legal part of this. And if that's the concern, then that's a problem. I mean, legally, you're required to provide an accommodation when someone says, I need an accommodation. And as pretty as your like policy might be in your system of doing it, knowing that if I verbally say to my supervisor, I need XYZ, even though I didn't fill out your online form or whatever it is, I legally just requested an accommodation. And so it's your responsibility to do that. So there's that piece, but then there's the ethical piece of what is your responsibility to build a safe culture for all of your employees. Just like you should be doing racial equity work, are you doing anti-ableism work? And are you doing these things together in an intersectional way? Like, so I think there's the legal piece and there's the ethical piece, and those are two completely different conversations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out and for pointing out the difference, because we do often come at things from a legal perspective, but the reality is like, we also have to think about what's right and what's our responsibility societally. So thank you. Kara, same initial question. Also, if you want to add anything here, but you know, you're an editor, someone's coming in. How do you make sure that they know it's an environment that they can thrive in and ask for help in? And what do you do as a new reporter, journalist, or employee?
Well, like Jeff sort of covered it. It's like, really, it's the editor really needs to just be like, what are your accommodations? What do you need? And then just get them and don't talk about them a lot. Like, it's unless like, and don't use it, because I've seen this where they'll do accommodations for one person and then but they're not comfortable with the accommodation for the next. And so they'll say, but we're an okay org, because look, we do this for Bob. And it shouldn't be, and this goes to what Jeff was saying, it shouldn't just be about legal. Like, you should care enough about your employees that they are not hurting themselves trying to do this job. Because a lot of times what happens is, and I don't think people actually realize this, what happens is disabled people will hide their disability and turn themselves in knots, break themselves basically, until they can't work, because you have created a space that is not accepting of it. So you're actually harming people. This isn't a passive thing. And I think that's what people think. It's like, oh, well, it's just a thing. It's not a big deal. This is actually harm that you're creating. It's not a passive judgment that you're doing. It is not an accident. You are creating an environment that harms people.
Really described my career before I came here, Kara. You're correct. I feel seen. And like, again, thank you for laying that out so clearly. And I think it is true, like from my own experience, people hide their disability and then they break themselves. It's exactly what you said.
Can I just throw something out there for anyone watching who's like a number person? Because I'm always trying to tell people why they should be doing anti-ableism and inclusion and accessibility training. 76% of employees with disabilities don't disclose them. So that is 76% of people with disabilities in your workforce are not getting the accommodations they need. And you also need to think about that in like what's been said, that's unhealthy for them. They're gonna burn out, they're gonna leave. So it also helps to create a retention for your employees. You have less turnover. And employees across the board, if you're doing anti-ableism work, just like doing racial equity work and other justice work within your company, you're creating a safe space that more people are going to stay and they're going to produce better work. So it's not even just about the individual and the ethics of it, which it should be, but it also has a payoff for you as a company. You're spending less money on bringing on staff and you're getting better product and turnout from people when you do these things.
You answered the question I was about to ask. Thank you. I will also say, folks, please, some of you already have, so thank you. Please drop your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And if you are unable to do those, you can email me or send me a voice note after I put my email at the top. And I'll make sure Kara and Jeff see it and we'll try to get you an answer. So please ask us your questions. One question I have, so I have been disabled at various points in my life and career. And one of the things that I experienced as an employee who was disabled, particularly like in my 20s, was first you have to come to terms with it, that you need an accommodation. Then you have to realize, okay, I have a disability that is making it hard to do my job. Then you have to figure out what you need, which is really hard. And then you have to ask for it. These are three very, very difficult journeys. What advice do you have for employees at each of those steps? Because an employer can't give you the accommodations you need unless you know what you need, right? Or is that wrong? Like, yeah, thoughts?
I think we all go through these journeys. I've been a dwarf my whole life, but I got knee problems. I developed knee problems like 3 years ago, but actually they were probably there a long time before that. And I was pressing myself at my job to do things I shouldn't have been doing. Anyway, collapse happened and it took me a while to figure out what I needed. And so I think for the employee, you just kind of, when you develop a disability, it's like your whole body changes. So you have to figure it out. And like, I don't know, yesterday I could do this, today I can't. And maybe I can force myself to do that. And then I have to lie down for 3 days. But so it's this, and I think it's part of our culture being ableist is that I think we probably fight it for a while too, because we don't want to be it. And so we probably hurt ourselves a little bit. So I feel like when you're starting to develop a disability, and it's hard because we are all ableist, because we all come from here, be kind to yourself and just listen, calm down. It's not as bad as you think. Just wait it out, you'll figure it out. And like, this comes from someone, as soon as my knees went out, I was like, I am not falling for this. And my recovery has been so much longer because of it. So be kind to yourself.
I think it's unfair to expect people to know exactly what they're going to need. Because of what, like you were just saying, if it's an acquired disability, I have no idea what I need. I'm just coming to terms with it and figuring out what my body or mind can do right now, given this new status. But even for folks who've had a disability their whole life, right? I see a lot of young people who they don't identify. Their parents wanted to keep it a secret from them. They go on to college and all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what's going on, right? So they may not know what accommodations they need. The other thing to remember is just because an accommodation worked in college doesn't mean it's going to work in the workplace. So that the reality is they may come in and say, this is what worked for me in the past, and you might try it. And a couple months later, you're like, we need to rethink this. Let's start over again. Of course, if someone says, I've had this accommodation, I want to do this, that's what you should go with. But I always tell employers, this needs to be a conversation because they may not know exactly what they need, and that's okay. And so that's where you have conversation together, and that's where understanding what their needs are is important, but also then utilizing the resources you have. Reach out to independent living centers, reach out to ADA centers. Like there are so many people out there and organizations that could be a support to help you brainstorm and come up with ideas for accommodations.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any resources? Kara, can you tell us a little bit about the Disabled Journalists Association, and like if somebody feels like if somebody's in the journalism field and is either an employer or feels like they might have a disability and are trying to figure it out, is your organization a resource they could turn to? Are there other ones they should turn to?
Well, it depends on what they need. So my organization it's just coming into its own. It's a baby, it's a tiny baby. So it's me. So if you call, I will answer. I do. I spent a year listening to disabled journalists throughout newsrooms and listening to what was happening, what they needed. And that's kind of formed how I'm moving and building this thing. Depends on what you need. If you um need support, you need a ear, you need references, you need at this point, um I can't go to your employer. That's something I can't do, but I will support you in every other way. Help you with a resume. If I can't do it, I got somebody who can.
I
I
can.
you
What do
can.
you mean?
So like that's what we do. But if you need accommodation help, there's all these really cool nonprofits that are leading edge, like they do trainings in the workplace of how to use these accommodations, whether and you can hire an accessibility coordinator that will come in and go around your building and make sure that it's not just ADA compliant, but actually accessible. Because people think like ADA compliant is like, well, we got a ramp, but maybe the ramp is like, 200 feet long, and you could have put it on a different side of the building that wouldn't have been that weird. That's why you hire this person. You don't just get your builder to do it. I've been in hotel bathrooms where they're like, this is ADA compliant. And then the mirror is up at like 6 feet. And I'm like, well, I can't see it. And I'm 4'2", but like, what's a wheelchair user doing?
Mhm.
So it's not ADA compliant. You just made the toilet higher and you put some bars. Like, you did the basics.
Mhm.
So it's better to do all of it. And just go ahead and hire someone. And then I wish I had more resources when I was actively in newsrooms. I didn't know where to go for help. And I think that's now what Ford Foundation and a lot of organizations are trying to do, is they're trying to build all these support systems around workplaces and places that have never had them. But now I feel like it's much easier because I'm talking to the kids and and they're like, did you have this? I'm like, no, I had nothing. Zero. I was by myself. So I think it's getting a little better, and Google's your friend, and I'm around. And if I don't know it, I'll find somebody.
I love it. I also am around. Talk to me. Send me your resume. I love talking through these things. I did want to ask, so this is the thing, again, this has happened to me, this has happened to lots of people, where you are in the job and this comes, we're recruiters, right? So like, we talk to lots of candidates. You're in the running for a job, you're a finalist, you know that you have a disability. Legally, right, you're not required to disclose that before you start a job. Is there ever a benefit to it? There have been times where I have disclosed before, when I've been offered a job, like, listen, this is what I'm going to need, and they've made it clear that that's not going to happen, and I didn't take that job because of it. And I wonder if you have thoughts on whether people should, if there's a good way to approach that, and how do you figure out how to approach it? Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that first?
I don't think it's a good idea to disclose in the interview process unless you need an accommodation for the interview, right? Like if you need a sign language interpreter, request for the interpreter. Like, so if there's something you need for the interview, yes. Otherwise, no, it's not, it's none of their business at that point. The only time I can see it being a benefit to disclose, and this is a very like niche thing that I just happen to be in that world, is if you're applying for a job at a disability organization. Like, other than that, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't not disclose because I walk in the room and they're like, oh, like, so I'm disclosing by being there. Although Zoom's been interesting, because you can't really tell. But yeah, I'm not, this is why we don't really know how many disabled people work in newsrooms. Like, because why would you? People are like, are you upset that people are hiding? I'm like, why would, if I could hide and get a job, I would too.
I do think that for me, and leads into the next question, like as a woman of color, I already have a lot of imposter syndrome. So if there's anything that would make it in an ableist society a little bit harder to the job, I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to give this to me? And is that something that you two have seen come up, especially in the intersection of disability and like people of color in the US? Like, what are some unique challenges to us or things that you've seen that we face? Carrie, I see you laughing. You want to go first?
Well, Black and Native American people have the highest rate of disability. They also have the highest rate of poverty. Because poverty creates disability. It also puts you in it, and disability puts you in poverty. It's like this cycle that keeps going. So there are a lot of assumptions about people of color and disability. That's laziness is one. There's also like, I used to get this all the time. People would come up to me in the newsroom and say things like if I would write an article and it would do well, they'd be like, who knew you could write? That's so exciting that you can write.
Oh, no.
And I was like, what? Like, or sometimes someone would say something like, must have been nice. And like, I had a hard time like knowing, was it because I was Black or because I was dwarf or what was happening? But this one person was like, oh, that your parents must be so proud of you for going to college. And I was like, not really. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they have their master's degrees and my grandparents had their PhDs. So I'm kind of a loser. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, what? And there was this assumption that because I had the position I had, that I wasn't educated, and I had the position because I was a dwarf and couldn't get any further. It was like not calculating their own ableism and racism tied into why I was stuck. It was, must be you did it. You're lazy. You grew up in a poor area. Like, I got all of it. And I was like, I literally don't understand who you think I am or what kind of weird veil that you've put on me that's really on you. Like, I don't, and I think workplaces, but I speak about newsrooms a lot. Newsrooms really need to like investigate their racism, ableism, really like deeply. As a person who was working in newsrooms, but also watched the coverage, it's scary and they're missing a lot. And that's scary to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, anything to add there?
I mean, yeah, it just goes back to, if you're not doing this work in an intersectional way, you're not doing the work, right? And there is I think a reality, especially, and I don't work in news, so I didn't even think about it until you just said it, but on how things are reported, of even as we're having these conversations around racial equity and police and survivors and victims of police violence who are Black and brown, we're missing an important part of that conversation, that most of those people are also disabled. And so if we're not talking about that intersection, we're not we're not meeting the needs of the community and we're not doing the work all the way. I think the other thing, and of course, I say this as a white person observing, but with a lot of the young people that I work with, depending on their disabilities, they haven't always gotten the opportunity to be Black and disabled, or Asian and disabled, or queer and disabled. Depending on their disability, they are solely put in the disability box and they don't get to claim those other identities, or if it's not visible, they're put in the box based on race or gender or whatever it might be, and they don't get to explore the disability piece. So I think that's one thing that's really hard, is I think a lot of young people don't get the chance to actually be intersectional and explore what that means for them.
I'm just going to jump in. It's the way we talk about when we talk about minorities, we'll be like Black, Native American, Latino, and the disabled. And it's like, but we're all like, you can't not have a race and be disabled. Like, it's not possible. That's how we do things here on this earth, is you are a race and you might have a disability. So when you separate it, when you separate it, the default is always white. And so when you're covering things, you're always covering things based on this white lens, which when you're looking at the numbers, it's Black and Native Americans actually have the highest, and Black have the second highest rates of disability. I also think that Asian people probably have more instances of disability than we know, because the numbers are really low, and that doesn't make sense to me. Because when you look at New York's numbers, all of the Asian people that live in poverty in New York City, which is a good chunk, I think it's like 30% or something, if there's poverty, there's disability. They're just linked. And so we don't link these things. And we talk about poverty, we talk about disability, we talk about race, but we don't talk, like to Jeff's point, 30% of federal prisoners have a disability. Now cross that with race. Talk about the school to prison pipeline and how that targets disabled children. The government has the numbers. It's true. They do. And we just don't. And like, I know I'm going off in like circles, but if you don't talk about the intersections, then you're not dealing with it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we do at URL is, our focus is we're a network of Black and Brown led organizations. And as a recruiter, we work with folks in those organizations, but we work with folks across the board in journalism and other industries owned by and run by whoever. And that's part of the coaching that we try to do. And it's easy for people, and even us, like me, sometimes to get caught in the weeds, right? Of like these granular questions, but there is also like a big picture that I think you laid out really clearly. Thank you. We are going to jump to the Q&A. So if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and I will and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the remaining 17 minutes. This is one that I think, like, I'm sure, Kara, you've gotten a lot. Jeff, I imagine you've gotten a version of it in your company, which is how to reconcile, this is an anonymous question, how to reconcile a demanding workplace of excellence with being understanding of people's needs. Here's a common thing I hear more and more. A reporter says they cannot file a story because of mental health issues or burnout. The manager has to fill a spot on page 1 the next day. What to do? Kara?
Well, if you're getting people saying that they're burned out and they're having mental health issues, it's gonna hurt. But like, what's your culture like? Like, at some point, like, yeah, you got to fill it out on page 1. So you're going to end up having to put that to someone else. And then that person will burn out. And then you're going to trade off the burnout. So what can you do? I think not enough organizations think about what they can do to change the way they work so that people aren't coming to them saying they have burnout. So you're asking me about a particular situation. I don't know, like you'll have to give that to another reporter. But what can you do as a manager to rethink about how you do things so that that person doesn't get to that place?
Yeah, Jeff, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that was just said. I mean, it doesn't just happen one morning that you wake up and you're like, I need a mental health break. I'm burnt out. There was a whole period of time that led up to that. And so if the culture is not supporting people through that, and it just, I wrote this down earlier, Kara, you said when you were talking about the bathroom stuff in the mirror, you said people just do the basics, but do all of it. And so one thing I always tell people is your goal is to make things as accessible as possible so that people don't have to request accommodations, right? If you're doing this right, you're not going to see an increase in accommodation requests. You're just going to see an increase in safety and people disclosing because it's their identity. Like, and so that goes along though with culture. So if you have a culture that is burning people out, you're not doing all of it. You're just doing the basics.
And also your productivity will go up because people will be more mellow and like not stressed out about trying to get to work or do this or do that, because you've made it an accessible culture. Their
Mhm.
needs are taken care of. And I don't like it sounds contrary to everything that we do in newsrooms, but newsrooms are gonna have to like rethink this. You look at what just happened at Twitter or what's currently burning at Twitter, like Elon Musk said, everybody get back to work. And they're like, no, my life's rearranged now. This was accessible for me. We were working, it was working, and now you're trying to change it. So I quit. And then you have to hire new people and do it all over again. And you've lost, when you lose people, and I think people don't really grasp this, when you lose people, you're losing all that like experience, information, everything. You're not retaining it. You're starting over. So isn't it better to like keep them?
Yeah. Yeah, agree. There's one thing that there's one kind of, I think, group of people that makes up a lot of people in any industry, which is middle managers who are stuck between trying to support, like, and I try to assume best intentions, and I really think there's a lot of people who are trying really hard. And I think that's where that question about the page one spot came from. Like, you want to support your staff, you want them to have everything you need. At the same time, you're only responsible for a small part of the culture. So if you're a middle manager, how do you navigate that? Yeah, how do you navigate that? Because I think we've talked a lot about like the bottom and the top, but the middle is somewhere that I want to give a little bit of attention to.
So if you're in the middle, you're still responsible for a section, right? And if you can get your deliverables, like the whole point is the deliverable, correct? Like get that article out on page one. So then create an environment in your section. I've had managers do it. I've seen it, middle managers, not the top guys, who will create an environment that's accessible for everyone. Like there was a place I worked at, CNN Money. It was it was in CNN, but it was its own little thing. And they just were like, look, we're going to take care of everybody. We're not going to burn them out. We're going to try and like watch out for, and that was the culture, was to watch out to make sure everyone was okay, to catch people before they get to burnout and make sure they take a day off. They do these things. Like I think also management needs, in general, people think, and I'm not accusing anyone who's in this room of it, but I think in American culture, management is thought of as I'm the boss, I tell you what to do. And management really is it's managing resources, and people are resources, and making, if your resources are abundant, if they're comfortable, they will produce abundance for you. And so that means that whatever hard and fast rule the top guys are saying, we all know the top guys really don't actually care.
Yeah, they want the result. That's fair.
They want the result. So if you're producing it, figure out a way to make your little unit super accessible, because when you change one unit like that, then people start looking and like, how come everybody's so happy over there?
Why do my people want to go to that team?
Yeah, why are they all headed over there?
Yeah, that's fair. Jeff, anything to add to that on middle managers?
I 100% agree with everything that was just said. I think there's a lot of onus on the middle manager that you can create a culture of your own and do that work. And you are the front line. So chances are I'm coming to you when something's wrong or I need an accommodation anyways, that this shouldn't be new news to you. So yeah.
And if you're a middle manager and you have a disability, which also happens a lot, like you should feel empowered to take care of yourself and ask for those accommodations. Sometimes people don't, and this happens generationally too. We feel like I had it bad, so you should, like I suffered, so you should suffer. Nobody has to suffer. We can all just not suffer. So thank you for that. I think that's really important. We have a couple of questions that I do want to ask that are pretty like ADA specific. And I know that we've talked about you shouldn't just care about the law, you should also care about the ethics. But I do think that there's like people also need to know the law and they need to know what they're required to do and feel comfortable with it. And then be like, okay, within this and beyond this, I also want to do good for the people who I work for and with. So I'm going to ask these questions in that spirit because it's what people are wondering. So can you provide examples of what types of questions are off limits to hiring managers when talking to employees with disabilities? Jeff, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I do want to preface any ADA conversation that we're having though, that none of us are lawyers.
Yeah, none of us are attorneys. Please talk to an attorney.
But it's also important to realize that there's the ADA, but state by state, some states have stricter laws and guidelines around it. So it's important to do that research depending on what state you're in. As far as in the hiring process, like interview process and everything, you can't ask anything about disability. You can ask, and I put like in emails and outreach to anyone I'm interviewing, please let me know if there's any reasonable accommodations you need for this interview. That I will put out there and you should. But other than that, you can't ask anything about disability. You can ask about someone's ability to do the primary functions of a job. So, you know, do you know how to use this computer program? Can you drive? Can you, whatever it might be, but it can't be, I notice you use a wheelchair. Can you drive? Like, so, and understanding that when you ask a question of, can you do this thing? And they say yes, that could be with or without an accommodation, and they don't have to tell you that right now. So you're really just finding out, can you do the primary functions of this position?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Kara, anything to add there?
Not really. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like you can't ask, and when they're at the job, what accommodations do you need? And that's it.
I think that's great. Another kind of specific question we had, I think we work with a lot of folks who, this is also an anonymous question, but we come into contact with a lot of folks who are, they're small businesses, they have, Jeff, how big is Epic? How many employees do you have?
But there's only 2.5 of us on.
Okay, cool. So this actually, the reason I asked is because this question is, if you work for a company with 15 or fewer employees, do ADA protections apply to you? Are there different considerations and protections for people at small companies asking for accommodations? I would love for you to answer that question. I know that I would also like for you to talk a little bit about, in your experience as someone who has fewer than that many employees, how you approach these things and why, which you did a little bit before, but if you can expand on it, that would be great.
Yeah. So, well, I also want to be clear. So Epic is also under we have a parent organization, because I don't want to do all the work to be a 501c3. So that also makes it different for us because we are aligned with them as far as the amount of employees. So we are held to those regulations. There is rules around the numbers of employees. It depends state by state. Some stuff, again, some of it is also like buildings and the age of buildings. If you have a place that doesn't have a ramp and what might be allowed due to age, that all is going to depend on where you are in the specific legalities for that state. But as far as providing things, create a culture where you are asking for this and people are open to it and you're having these conversations. But also, it is my job to do that. It is my job to figure out. We hired or brought on an AmeriCorps member for a year who was deaf. And Epic didn't have it in our budget to have ASL interpreters every single day in that office, but I figured it out. We need to find the funding and to make it happen. And I know I'm a nonprofit, so finding funding looks different, but it is on us to make it work. And if I can figure out how to get funding for supporting this person for a year, like, it's there. The resources are there. It's your willingness to seek them out and do what extra work there might be to make them happen.
Yeah. Right. Kara?
I feel like, so when, like, building off of what Jeff said, it's like everyone, what do we have to do? And like, I know it's, I don't think people get it. You're missing out on real talent with that mindset. Like, well, what do I have to do? Well, find, like, what if, like, Jeff hired a deaf person? That person had the best interview. They were amazing, I assume. Like, what if Jeff was like, oh no, never mind, and I'll get, this guy who's not as good, but I don't have to pay for it, so it's better. And it's like, are you really winning then? And I feel like we have to stop talking about disability like it's a deficiency and it's like you're doing charity work when you hire people. No, this is for you. It's actually, and I wish I had the number, but it's actually proven that people who, businesses that hire disabled people make more money. I don't know what the calculation, I'm not a mathematician or an economist. I don't know what the calculations are, but I do know that the stat is out there that people that hire, companies that hire disabled people make more money. So are you really being efficient by not providing these services and accommodations?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna say I would love to end. I think that there's, especially when we talk about when disabled people, when we say like, yeah, we want identity first language, you can say that someone's disabled. It's fine, like relax. People conflate that with, we can think of disability as a deficit or as something wrong with someone. And that harms businesses, that harms people. So what is your best advice to folks who are here, who are listening or watching or reading, in terms of like how to, like, what's your biggest takeaway from this hour of us talking? And what is the one thing that people should take away when they think about or talk about or approach disability in the workplace or in a new role as a manager or as a new employee? Kara, you want to go first?
I think get rid of your scarcity mindset. That's the biggest thing. Like, this worry about, we're going to spend too much money on this person, we're not going to get enough from them. Like, we have enough resources. We just do. You just have to put the effort into doing it. And when you do that, it's like insulating your house. If you use the cheap stuff, in a couple of weeks or a couple of years, you're gonna have to do it again. Like, I've never owned a home. I don't know what I'm actually talking about, but you know what I mean? Like, if you make this big tent and put all the people in it, you will be more successful. And that's, get away from that scarcity. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Like, I'm using all of the metaphors and the
Every cliche, we love it.
Doing it.
Okay, awesome. Jeff, anything to add in the last 30 seconds?
Yes, really quick. I want to go back to something that was said before. It's a 20% increase in revenue. And then the question was based on a small business. If you have a small business that you're renting space that has stairs, I'm not expecting you to do the construction. I'm expecting you to think about when you move or open a new space, is it accessible? And the last thing to answer the last question is it's on you to unpack your ableism. We all have it. We were raised with it. Unpack it and do that hard work to unpack it.
And to clarify, that's in reference to 2 anonymous questions that I don't think everyone can see, which are, what's the best way to ask someone what their disability is? Should we be doing that? The answer that everyone has answered is no. And should you do an event in the upstairs of a restaurant without an elevator? If it deters attendance, to not do it there. I think the answer is also that was the answer that was what Kara and Jeff were just answering. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you, and thank you everyone who came, and please feel free to email me or send me a voice note or anything if you have any follow-up questions. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.